They say walk in your truth and not in your shadows. They also tell you you're too much, making you feel like a burden, but they always want you to speak up for what isn't spoken. Unspoken truth, hiding behind an unspoken poet, unspoken stories, never get told by unspoken words.
Yo, what's good? It's your girl, Becky the Poet here. Welcome to the Unspoken Words podcast. You guys, thank you for tuning in to last week's episode. We were at episode 105. That was dedicated to my cousin Aaron, if y'all didn't know. Today, we are at episode 106. Wait, did I do this wrong? Did I count wrong? It doesn't matter. I think, yeah, I'm at episode 106. So that means we just finished off the month of April, which was National Poetry Month. If you support a poet then, cool. But I would say keep supporting your poets. We are out here. We out here making moves. We out here speaking the truth. Out here just expressing our emotions one day, one poem at a time. You guys, we have a special guest here. Another podcast host. Also a poet. Showing love to these poets. And if you haven't checked out their podcast, after you listen to this episode, you must check out their podcast. Go ahead, special guest. Go into your poem.
First of all, thank you for allowing me to be here, Becky. I have finally made it. I have arrived, the Unspoken Words podcast. So thanks again. My name is Mike Payne. I am the host of the Ethically Immoral podcast. I'm going to go into my poem and then go ahead and get to know me a little bit better. So this poem is entitled To You. Here goes. I've never believed in soulmates or destiny. Fate makes little sense to me, and allowing chance to take the credit for the fact that we are making it does us no justice. We're here because we chose and want to be. Love is worthless if its purpose has no substance, and my love for you is no accident. It is on purpose. I came from a place of insecurity and vulnerability. Individually, my past has been littered with fear and disappointment, the unknown and tears, and years of disgust has eroded my willingness and ability to trust. But then I discovered you. Our first conversation lasted for hours. I devoured your answers to my questions as I yearned to learn more about you. My interest grew, and before I knew it, new lines were drawn, then crossed as control was lost. I made a personal vow to wow you, decided to allow you to see the Superman side of me, slide inside your mind and penetrate you mentally, then eventually, if ever having the opportunity, to overload your senses physically. Over time, your genuine desire to get to know me slowly but surely got you around the many walls I built. Your consistency and our immediate chemistry forced me to see you differently, and your honesty and transparency grabbed a hold of me, and eventually I realized how much I needed you. I love your smell, your face, your taste, your body, your personality, but most importantly, who you are and who you want to be. This isn't just a poem for your birthday. It's my written expression that I desire and crave you in the worst way. I anticipate growing with you, learning because of you, discovering more about myself and loving and being loved by you. I love you. And that's that piece.
That was a great piece. I actually was thrown off by the title when you're like, oh, that poem is to you. And I was like, to me? Or is it like and then you went into these, like this love, like expressing your love. And I was like, is he in love with me?
Yeah.
And then you went on and you're like, your smell. I was like, oh, he's never met met me in person.
That's true.
He's never smelled me. Just kidding.
That is absolutely true. Scratch and sniff.
Sorry, I have to laugh because my video guy and his girlfriend are listening to just me, so they can't hear you. So I'm pretty sure they're like, "What in the world are they talking about?"
Well, that's how it is. That's how
All right. So, Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself one more time and tell them what podcast you host and where can they find you on all social media platforms.
Again, my name is Mike Payne. I am the host of the Ethically Immoral podcast. You can find us on Instagram at Ethically Immoral, our website, ethicallyimmoralpodcast.com. And yes, you can find us on all podcast platforms. We're also on Twitter at The Mecca Lounge and Facebook at Ethically Immoral Podcast. Yes, that's who I am. From Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Cheese. All I think about is cheese when I hear that.
Cheese, cows, like I was telling you off air. Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days are a couple of others that we are known for. But Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo, there you go. The Packers, Green Bay Packers is another.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Wisconsin.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, duh.
So, but yeah, that's who I am, and trying to do my podcast thing.
Nice. So before we get started with getting any further deep into this conversation, what is my positive affirmation for today is I just had it.
Oh.
Is that I would not compare myself to strangers on the internet. That is something that I think Instagram, social media in general, we've kind of do that often without even trying to, this person has a better podcast than I, this person takes better photos than I, or, so try not to compare ourselves. So what is your positive affirmation today, Mike?
First of all, I like that. And the examples that you gave, just because it's so easy for us to do that. And, in a way we're taught by or encouraged by society to do that. So I like that one. For me, I would say continue to strive to be your authentic self. I truly believe in being the best person that I possibly can be, even when I don't want to be. Ultimately feel better at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And people have a tendency to respect and appreciate you for who you are, and get to know what to expect when it comes from you. So yeah, that's my positive affirmation.
Well, I like it. I like that one too. That was a good one.
Appreciate that.
For you guys who are listening, make sure to say your positive affirmations today just to get you going for the week. So I got to ask you, Mike, how are you feeling today, this week? So far, anything heavy on your heart lately?
Oh man, it's been a crazy time just socially, with everything going on. Pick your day, pick your week, month. But so that, and as I was thinking about things just as creatives, being a creative myself, whether it be a writer, a poet, a podcast host, in this time, just being able to express and get things off of our chest, as poets. Well, I'll speak for me as a poet. Poetry just drags emotions and thoughts out of me that I typically won't be able to express on my own for whatever the reason. People who know me or have heard the podcast know that I am not a fan of vulnerability. I reject vulnerability to a degree, and but poetry, for whatever the reason, it has its way of forcing me to subconsciously tap into that vulnerability, and it brings out emotions that I haven't even realized that was there, And so, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say, I totally agree. I was just speaking to a friend the other day about some rappers who they can rap very well, but you catch them in interviews or you catch them on like vlogs and they don't talk as much, or when they talk, it doesn't sound like how they rap. And my friend goes, sometimes rappers, the only way to express themselves is through their music. That's how they talk, you know? It's because I was pointing out a rapper I don't listen to often, but I caught him in an interview just watching the video, and I was like, he sounds like a little kid, or like he ain't even talking normal. But his when I listen to his music, it's a whole different ball game. And I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just being in that creative space just draws out for a lot of people confidence that they typically wouldn't have in one-on-one situations or in a group setting. You know, it's almost like we go into our alter ego, you know, which is, you know, for a lot of us, just an extension of who we are. We just tap into a place that we, you know, typically wouldn't. And so for poetry or even the podcast, I mean, for me, that's what that does. And like I said, with poetry and writing poetry, and, you know, even with the piece that I just shared, you know, a lot of those feelings I didn't even know were there. So so those type of things have been weighing on me lately. And as I'm talking to you, you know, on this podcast, just how important our platforms are.
Yeah.
Just for creatives like ourselves and up and coming poets or up and coming spoken word artists or whomever it is that we talk to, who are looking for a place to share not only their work but their projects. You know, there are a lot of people who don't have a platform to do so and need us and platforms like ours to allow them space to do their thing. And my responsibility as essentially a curator is to provide that space. And so watching and listening to podcasts like yours and other podcasts that I listen to and watch, I love what we do, and we're needed.
I will say, great like expression, because it leads into today's topic of poets having a platform to express their poetry. I know, I think this year and last year is when I feel like poetry kind of popped on bigger platforms, kind of like America's Got Talent. Now, I don't watch TV often, let alone even kept up with it, but I did see a poet that was on America's Got Talent and won. Brandon Leak. And I went back and did some research on him, and, you know, saw his like YouTube, and he's been doing poetry on YouTube, like posted his stuff for like 6 or 7 years. And it's crazy because at that time, like, he wasn't getting a lot of like views, you know, just looking at his views. And there's some poems that he did, you know, he kind of popped. It depends on what poem it was. And then I think even now he started a podcast called Poets and Politics. I think on YouTube, I saw they were on episode 3. I didn't get to check out the podcast, but, you know, that's one thing. Also, you had Amanda Gorham, who was an inauguration poet, but also Super Bowl poet, you know, which is something that they've never had, you know. I actually am horrible at like keeping up with politics, let alone even educated by like what has happened, like, you know, like past presidency and whatnot. But I didn't know there was always a poet at every like inauguration, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So when I found out about Amanda, and I was like, let me go look into it. And I was like, oh, there's been like plenty of poets that have done this. And I was like, that's interesting, because I never knew that. You know, you just kind of just think as poetry as like open mic or as live performances. But because of what's going on now, things have changed. Things gone virtual. Things have gone into, lots of poets want to hop on podcasts, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. I mean, and especially with COVID. I mean, I remember, so I started my podcast, or at least this variation of it, last May. And, you know, the lockdowns and the quarantines have made and even now have made spoken word artists and poets eager to get out and share their work, to share, their message. And so when you talk about the willingness to appear on podcasts, that's one of the benefits of selfishly of COVID, is that it's given me the opportunity to talk to a lot of different creatives that I may not have talked to otherwise. If everything was open, people may have been reluctant to sit down and talk to me about things that are happening with them as individuals, and they would just rather focus on getting out and performing. You talk about Amanda, and you talk about Brandon, and the platform, the larger platform.
Right.
The thing is that it's interesting because we've had, as poets and creatives, we've had platforms before. I've seen Rudy Francisco on The Tonight Show. I've seen Prentice Powell on the Arsenio Hall show, and
I've also seen Rupi. She's been on Jimmy Fallon before.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're right. And so I won't say concern, but my fear is that the momentum will die down, and eventually those platforms won't be, and those spaces won't be as numerous as they are right now, except for maybe the people, the artists that we know of.
Right.
So again, when we talk about the platforms that we provide, that we offer, right, it is important, and our responsibility to help keep spaces like this open for those who don't have that higher name recognition, and for us to not just focus on the product or their poetry, but really get to know who they are. And for me, my thought is, what better way to build a fan base for up and coming spoken word or artist or poet than allowing the listener an opportunity to get to know the poet on a personal level, invest in them that way, become fans of who they are as people, so that way when they are out promoting whatever projects that they have, they say, I know that person, I understand that person, I relate with that person, I'm more willing now to support that person at whatever it is that they do.
Yeah, I really totally agree on that. I mean, there are people who are famous, you want to call it, or like you see on Instagram, your internet friends who have all these likes and have lived this best life of them, Yeah. You don't really know exactly who they are.
Right.
When I used to run track, I used to have people who are in the track game above me, like I idolize them to the point where like I want to be like them, And I'm not gonna say any names, but after talking to some people at different colleges, and I was like, dude, that's so cool, you go to this college, and that because this professional athlete runs over there, and I was like, it's so cool, like how are they in person? And sometimes what shocks me is that sometimes the person you think you see like on TV or just by passing by, they aren't the greatest, like I guess they don't have the greatest personality sometimes,
Right.
It makes you like, oh, you only idolize what you see and not like actually who they are,
Right.
It's kind of like when you meet your celebrity, finally meet them, and you're like, dude, this guy is funny, blah blah blah, and then you're like sitting in the room, it's just like staring at each other because they're not funny at all.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the sayings, like you should never want to meet your favorite celebrity, right? Yeah, or your celebrity crush or something like that, something to that effect. I think one of the things though, when it comes like to, and maybe not in all instances, but when it comes like to creatives and poets and in particular, because a lot of what we see and what we hear comes from the same place that our work comes from, right?
Oh, definitely.
It all comes from, a place of, happiness, joy, pain, frustration, sadness. A lot of times poets write from a place of despair. It's a way to express and get the weight off of their chest and off of their shoulders. So in that sense, we are able to relate. And then, when it comes like to COVID and everything else, I've noticed that a lot of just celebrities in general, they're online more. They are interacting with their fans on a more consistent basis. And granted, while we don't know what happens or who they are once the cameras are turned off or the lives are done, at least being able to interact with them on a more consistent basis will, at least if you are keen enough, to be able to get a little bit of a better idea of who they are, because eventually who they are is going to show to some degree. So
definitely. I mean, as this thing keeps going on, I keep running into more poets, and I run into their social medias, and kind of like what they say on social media makes me wonder about things. I think I saw a post the other day about how slam poets, they're different from like these poets who I call it like not regular decklers, but like me, I'm not a slam poet. I'm not a competitive poet at all. I just go out to open mics and perform whatever I feel or whatever. And then apparently it's a whole different ball game. And I'm like, that's interesting because, you look up to these slam poets. You go to these performances with these headliners. They're like, dude, I want to perform like them. But then you see these poets who are part of the slam team or whatnot, and they come out to light with all these different issues that we don't see behind the curtains,
Right.
And it just makes you just look at things differently. I will say there's lots of poets now, like locally, that I know that are great poets, right? And they're trying to make it out here and be a paying poet or whatnot, and there are poets out here who just write for fun. Who,
right.
It's like my best interaction with poets is going to a poetry workshop, and everybody is sharing a piece or have one writing prompt, and everybody's sharing like different poems related to that writing prompt. And that's like the most genuine interaction I've had with poets, because they're supportive. Like these poets, local poets, and if you find that small group of poets, they're supportive, and they love your work just as much as you, and they uplift you, which makes you want to write more.
Absolutely. I mean, and it builds rapport between, the different poets who may come from different areas around the city or state, and may have different backgrounds depending on the type of workshop that you attend, and it's an exchange of ideas. And we tend to write from, us regular quote unquote poets tend to write from the heart, in those type of settings. I think, and I'm not a performance poet at all. So, but when you talk about slam poets, I mean, how competitive that is, and you have to do things a certain way, and it's not about necessarily sharing your most personal pieces all of the time, and the goal is to connect in different ways than it would be on a regular, normal basis. But I have heard some competitive poets share some of their personal work and really just be quote unquote regular, and that's amazing too, but yes, I totally agree. And those writing workshops and just hanging out and just completing writing prompts together, I mean, it's just something different. It feels different.
I will say podcast and poetry is a very interesting combination. You know, for example, I started this podcast to get my poetry out there, right? To, you know, YouTube wasn't my platform just yet. So why not just use words people could just listen to, you know? And getting into this podcasting world, I kind of shifted into the YouTube aspect, right? In hopes that people hear this and watch this, because at the end of the day, you can't beat people who want to watch things rather than listen things. And especially now on YouTube, hold on, I'm charging. Especially now on YouTube where it's all good. Especially now on YouTube where people can buy their membership, like YouTube Premium, and just play and then, you know, walk away from it and it play like regular Spotify app, you know?
Yeah.
And so I would say poetry is kind of still behind in this world of like getting put on platforms and whatnot, because it's different. You know, we're so used to the stage, in person, the live audience, and that being behind a camera or being just a voice with no audio, with no visual is different, you know? I think then we have to change about who we are as a poet, you know, because now you have performing poets. Now you create categories of virtual poets. Am I a virtual performing poet? Am I just an audio poet? Do I just want to read my poems from a book and call it a day? You know?
I do. I mean, that is interesting, you know, when you talk about, you know, YouTube Premium, and how you can, you know, listen to a music playlist, and walk away and clean or whatever it is that you're doing. But, you know, poetry like that isn't necessarily something that is popular yet. I don't know why that is. Maybe because poetry invokes so many different, I mean, songs do too, but poetry invokes so many different type of emotions. It's almost like I don't know, it just affects you in a different way, in the sense that it's hard to do other things while taking in the message. You know, a lot of times when it comes to music, a lot of times we don't know the words to the song, the beat hypes us up, right? Or, you know, or we may know a certain part of the song, but when it comes to poetry, it forces you to listen. It forces you to feel. It forces you to experience, especially when you're listening to a performance poet who has the ability to change the range of emotion and really make you feel what it is that they're saying. And so I think, like you said, or I believe, like you said, poetry is, I don't know if it's, I won't say it's behind, but it just moves at a different pace. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, my best advice from a poet, I had a guest poet come to my show, and I asked him what he thought about my event, and I kind of took it as a learning lesson, a lesson learned, whatever the word arrangement is. They said, keep it simple. You know, having a band and having all this extra stuff kind of takes away from the art of poetry.
Yeah.
And I totally took that, and I was like, damn, let me reevaluate my events in the past. And it did. My simple events, I felt were more were more intimate. And then my bigger events, where I got a little bit fancy and snazzy about it, they weren't as, like, people would, I don't know, the delivery was different, you know? It turned into like a little get together, a little function, instead of like a poetry event, which simple is always better when it comes down to poetry, because, you know, like you said, you have now like people are adding instrumentals to poetry, which is great. Even I write poetry with instrumentals, but sometimes the instrumental overpowers the words. And either way, if you don't do it correctly, you hear the instrumental more than you hear the words, which is not something you want to always do.
Right. You would want the music to complement the poetry rather than it be the other way.
Because it'll turn into a rap in a heartbeat.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because now you're trying to keep up with the beat because it's so instinctive sometimes, you know. I do have a question for you though. I know that I'm the guest here and you're the host.
Go ahead, ask me the questions. Fine. we can transition that question onto your podcast.
Oh, okay. Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah.
But go ahead and ask. I'm here for it.
Well, you mentioned how you you started off audio and then you went to YouTube. How was that transition? How was that transition for you? And what was the goal of doing it that way?
So it was weird because you sit there. Some people prefer to watch interviews, right?
Yeah.
And so poetry is cool. I was talking about life, and then I got into getting guests into the show, which is when I was like, my cousin, she reached out to me. She's like, "Why don't you post on YouTube?" And I was like, "Why?" And she was like, "Because I watch things on YouTube." And I was like, "So you don't listen to anything? You don't listen to anything on any other platform?" She's like, "No." And then it made me think because recently Spotify is now promoting more of the podcasters.
Yeah.
But not everybody supports Spotify. Not everybody supports Apple, but they'll support YouTube. And you're on there all day. The only thing that's different now is that you have ads. Right. And so the transition of it was different. At first, I didn't like it, because it was just too much work. Because a podcast is a podcast. Stick with the audio, call it a day. Cool. Right. But when I transitioned, I was like, this is a lot more work. But now you see podcasters, big podcasters who do the visual too. Yes. They're getting lots of views. But if I was to tell somebody hey, if you're doing a poetry podcast or a focus on anything like that, do you have to do video? It's not a have to, it's if you want to. It's like an extra legwork,
How is it now for you now that you made that transition?
Well, the only thing that's have helped me a lot is that I have my video guy set it up for me. So all I do is just come here and sit down and record. But if I didn't have him, and when I was doing it by myself, I hated it because I had to set the stupid camera up. And sometimes I didn't hit the right button. So if the mic is on, it's on. If it's not, it's not. That's lost audio, loss of time. So it's easier for now because I have help. But if I didn't have help, I would cut the video in a heartbeat because I don't have time to edit it. I don't have time to sit there and set it up. I don't have time to carry and lug this around and hope that my car doesn't get broken into, That's the things you got to worry about when you just...
I bet.
But we're getting towards the end of this. And I will say, I do love having you on this show. I'm really glad that you ran into me, I'm pretty sure Instagram and social media was a great help to that. Are you frozen? Oh, you're not moving at all. I do want to extend that conversation to your show. So Absolutely. One more time, remind the audience to what your podcast is called again.
So it's called the Ethically Immoral Podcast. Again, ethicallyimmoralpodcast.com is the website. Every Sunday after 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on the website and all podcast platforms. Though I think there's a slight delay when it comes to the podcast platforms, but yes,
it's there. It's always there.
It's there. It's always there. That's right.
So before you go, what 3 advice can you give to the audience who to give to poets actually on how they can get their poems on different platforms?
Wow. I would say first of all, inquire about getting your work on different platforms. Simply asking may work. I would also say write on a continual basis, but also be genuine in when you are writing. Because at least for me, that tends to be when I produce the most honest, genuine, and my best work. And then I would say my third tip would be to and I'm trying to be funny here, but start your own. Start your own platform, whether it's a website, a blog, a podcast, and share your work that way. Podcasts are exploding, they're everywhere. And it's not that expensive, really. It's not that expensive. You will be surprised now. You don't even need a fancy mic with a filter on it and all of that. You can record from your phone. So those will be my three.
Those are three great advice I also agree with. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
So before you go, give us something positive. Give us a funny joke, a riddle, a story, a short story, or anything, but make sure it's funny, happy, uplifting, all the above right there. What you got?
Man, I can't guarantee funny, so I'm not gonna.
It could be those corny dad jokes. Those are.
Oh yeah, I've seen those. So yesterday, I was riding with my daughter. We had went to get something to eat, and we were coming home. And as we pulled in to the lot, she said, "What does inspiration mean?" I was like, "Well, that's a very good question." And I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, "Well, it's when one person motivates another person to do something." And she said, "Oh." And then she said, "Well, Beyonce has been inspired by a lot of people because a lot of her songs other people have made. So she's calling Beyonce a hater." So Beehive first. Beehive. That's not me. I did not say that. That was not.
Now my Beyonce fans are gonna be in here.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Unspoken Words podcast. So
I
yeah.
have to take her off the audio. The intro.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So corny, but
it's all good. It's all good. Kids are very brilliant nowadays.
They are. So.
But thank you, Mike, for coming on the show. You guys check out his podcast. Listen, follow him on Instagram, and then you will hear me on his podcast soon.
Absolutely. Got to make that happen. Thank you,
guys. Well, we are out. Thank you so much. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to my YouTube at Becky the Poet, and then follow me on Instagram, Becky the Poet, and the podcast, Unspoken Words Podcast. All right, you guys. Love ya.